An important thing about spirituality is understanding consciousness and understanding ego and realizing that those two things are absolutely necessary along this journey on this earth. Many people will say that the ego should be taken out of the equation, is the essence of all the problems that we're having. And in part, I believe that is true, but I also believe that the ego is necessary in this realm, in this world, on this planet Earth, because it creates an anchor for us here in this realm. It creates an identity for you to be able to essentially identify yourself from others, to identify who you are along your journey. And in order for us to have this spiritual journey, right, to play this spiritual game, that is an element that cannot be taken out. Once that element is taken out, you're no longer playing the game of life here on earth. You're playing another game, right? Then at that point, you are truly one with grand consciousness and the universe. But we're not here for that. We're here to have a separate experience so that way God can have an experience through us, right? Consciousness, the universe, has an experience through us. That's why we're here. We're an individualized spark, essence of God having an experience as you. And so when you think about consciousness, realize that that is the purest essence of who you are. Your consciousness is the core of who you are, the God of you, right? That is the purest and most beautiful, most amazing aspect of who you are. And everything else grows outside of that. Now, remember, the ego is the anchor. The ego is the thing that tethers us to this realm, to this world. And though the ego can cause a lot of trouble, that is simply because we are not managing our ego well. We are just letting our ego kind of take control of everything. And the spiritual journey is truly about acknowledging the ego and understanding how to manage that ego. Some people say control the ego. I'm not really into the word control. I feel more manage it is more, it's something that more resonates with me personally. But ultimately, you want to get to a place where you understand the ego, its place, and it is kept where it needs to be. It is kept in its lane, so to speak. Now, when you deal with things like meditation or you deal with mindfulness and you practice these techniques, realize that when you are meditating and when you are practicing mindfulness, you are tapping into being the observer of you, right? Of this identity, which is you. Truly, you're being the observer. Your consciousness is then being the observer, right? Watching over you, your realm, your domain, your universe, you and what you are creating here on this earth. And your ego is being observed. And when you have those two things in alignment, you realize that your consciousness is simply observing your ego. So that way you can monitor if you are being in alignment with the things that your consciousness wants for you or wants to create in your life currently. And so when your consciousness is observing, right, and you may look at your ego as something that just, if it isn't living in alignment with the things that you want, then you will find unhappiness, depression, sadness, frustration, anger, all of the negative emotions that we associate with basically being unhappy. Now, on the spiritual journey, when you are tapped into your consciousness, tapped into the God of yourself, right, the God within you, then you align with understanding that the ego is an anchor point to create a identity for you, right, by which grand consciousness can experience life through you with. Then you begin to see how understanding the balance and the connection between these two things truly is important for happiness. Now, you have to realize, though, that, again, the consciousness is the observer, right? Because that is the part that is completely perfect, beautiful, and pure, whereas the ego is something that is influenced by the things that we went through during this life, right? It is also a thing that is influenced by subconscious programmings and thoughts and feelings and trauma. And so the consciousness of you is communicating with the ego when you're along the spiritual journey consciously. And what you're doing then is communicating with the ego, communicating with healing the ego, essentially managing the ego, and coming to a place where both of those things are aligned in this world, in this reality, to create wholeness, happiness, wellness, and fulfillment throughout your life. All right. So during meditation, during mindfulness, your consciousness is the observer. Your ego is the observed. All right. When you are meditating, you are pulling back from your thoughts. You are observing your thoughts. Oftentimes, we associate our thoughts with our identity. In a sense, it is your identity. It is your ego. It is your ego's identity that is having those thoughts, those feelings, those things, right, going on. So you just have to manage and understand the connection between those things, and that will create such peace and wholesomeness for you along your journey. And that will support you through the journey, because then you start to understand where the elements of who you are is placed along this journey. Because many of us get confused. We know that we are a divinity. We know that there's purity in us, but then we get mixed up because, we may do something that just doesn't make sense, or we may be triggered by something. We may feel anger all of a sudden, and we just can't understand how these two things can simultaneously exist within one person. And we can't come to grips or balance because simply we are not understanding the dynamic between consciousness, purity, or pure self, and the ego. And that's also why we tend to blame the ego for everything, as if the ego is just this demon that is responsible and that is there to just cause like a mess and cause drama and cause pain. But that's not really what the ego is here to do. It is doing that because we're not managing, we're not communicating from our consciousness to the ego to make sure that the ego aligns itself with what consciousness wants. Thank you so much for listening. Continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.